first of all, really thank you very much. It's much appreciated joining us. Really wanted to do this, and it could be very interesting. And obviously, it's a very busy time for you. Really, I guess maybe we'll start off by asking, really the latest news of last weekend, the prices have kind of jumped. They're going across 4,000, now it's dropped below. What do you think about it? Is this some kind of short-term correction, or is this maybe more of a longer-term trend? How do you see it?
Yeah. So I think there's two things. One is, the short-term price movements are hard to predict, but I do think that it is likely we have not seen the bottom. And okay. So we could return back to levels that we've reached, in the last couple of weeks. We may even go a little bit lower. I think our target from August of 2018 has been 3,000. We came close once already, so we may just actually go back there or somewhere close. Along with that, over a long period of time, I tend to think that some of the bigger numbers that are thrown out will likely be accurate. So we're talking about, kind of the 50, 100,000, 150,000 type numbers. The hard part is just what's that time frame look like, right? Is that in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? I'm not sure, right? I think it's harder to predict, but we do think that there's kind of a lot of upside here.
When you say target, you mean Morgan Creek's target? What exactly do you mean by that?
No, I think kind of analysts or folks in the industry, right? So you hear everyone from the venture capitalists like Tim Draper's of the world, all the way through to kind of entrepreneurs in the space. Everyone's throwing out these price targets, and I tend to think it's less about people are wrong in 2018, and it's much more that those price targets are actually accurate. The time frame is what's inaccurate, and so it's just going to take longer to get there than people originally thought.
Obviously, you're very bullish, especially regarding long term. It was a whole you had a Buffett bet 2.0. Really, maybe you can explain a bit more about your thinking behind it. Obviously, it wasn't about the money; it was more to it. Yeah.
So the bet that we surfaced to folks was we put $1 million on the line to say that cryptocurrencies would outperform stocks over the next 10 years, right? And the way that we constructed the challenge was to take the S&P 500, a passive index of stocks or public equities, versus our digital asset index fund, which is a passive large cap index of the top 10 cryptocurrencies, about 85% market coverage. Both of the indexes have some float requirements and things like that. And so our outlook over a 10-year time frame is that digital asset index fund will outperform the S&P 500. And it's a statement not only on our bullishness on the cryptocurrencies, but it's also a statement on our bearishness on the outlook for public equities over the next 10 years, right? Kind of, sub 5% annualized returns. And crypto, obviously, if it goes how we and others think it will be much, much higher than that.
Were you surprised no one took it?
I was disappointed no one took it, but I do think that there are a lot of detractors or detractors of crypto, but the likelihood that any of them actually believe what they're saying is very low. And so the odds that one of them would put their money where their mouth is was something we wanted to see, and no one took it. So I think it tells you everything you need to know.
Yeah, so I guess even by the fact that no one took it, you basically kind of achieved what you set out to.
Yeah. I mean, look, we obviously wouldn't issue a challenge like that unless we believed it and thought we were going to win, right? That would be pretty dumb. So at the core, that's what we did. But obviously there's also this element of, hey, all of these detractors that are out there, do they actually believe what they're saying? Are they willing to put skin in the game in a way that benefits charity? And then also, too, doesn't require any sort of, kind of shorting of the asset and it being volatile and things like that.
Right. Got any other bets coming up?
Nah, that's the only one. I think that's a one-time thing for us.
And really, I guess let's kind of look back at 2018. Obviously, very volatile year everywhere across the crypto world. Also you personally and Morgan Creek, how was the experience for you?
Yeah, so 2018 was I think, really unique in that, one, a ton of the tourists got washed out, right? And so these people who were just there trying to kind of make quick money in a very unsustainable way are, mostly driven out of the market. There's still some left, but I'm sure that those will kind of dissipate over the next couple of months. And two, and probably the most important thing for us was in 2016, my partner and I came out and said, look, we're not going to invest in any of these ICOs, right? We think the ICOs are unregistered securities. We think they are a really bad investment opportunity. So from an entrepreneur standpoint, to raise non-dilutive capital with no governance, no oversight, no recourse, it's an amazing opportunity. From an investor's perspective, horrible opportunity. Right. And so we refrained from that. And in 16, that was easy to do. In 2017, there's people who were telling us that we were wrong and we were dumb and we were missing out on all the best investment opportunities. And I think 18 was really vindication that we didn't chase those shiny objects, if you will. It ended up, that, yes, a lot of these are going to be unregistered securities. A lot of people actually have lost money investing in this stuff, even though they were up big in 2017. And there's a likelihood that our investors are quite appreciative of our ability to kind of sidestep some of that stuff. So 2018, I think, was just kind of a sobering moment and a little bit of vindication for those that had been somewhat sober going into 2018.
I guess so. You mentioned the ICOs. You're saying even in advance, you could see how problematic it might be also from a securities SEC standpoint. How do you look at it now when really it's kind of unfolding and the SEC is coming down? Do you think, ICOs are dead, or do we have some kind of future?
I think the big thing is going to be we need some sort of clarity from the regulatory bodies. We've got one side that says everything looks like a security. We've got lawmakers in the U.S. who are proposing legislation that cryptocurrencies should be carved out and set aside from securities regulation.
Right.
All of this is above my pay grade, right? I tend to side with most entrepreneurs in the sense of just tell me what the rules are, and then we'll go build companies, right? And that's the big question right now, or what are the rules, right? How is this going to be governed? And once that clarity comes out, I think you're going to see a lot of entrepreneurs and investors, kind of say, okay, this makes sense. Let's go build companies. And that will be a really important milestone for the industry.
You think that's coming in 2019, or is this more longer term?
I got to hand it to the regulators that they've done a fantastic job so far not being heavy-handed, right? If you look in other places like, India and China, a lot of the regulatory kind of oversight has, been somewhat volatile itself. So they ban something, they unban it, they add more regulation, they take it away. It's really hard to build companies in that sort of business environment. And so I think that in the United States, regulators have said, we're going to let this play out. And while that's playing out, we're actually going to go learn. And they spend a bunch of time trying to educate themselves, identify who the right players are, who are the good people, what are they doing, why is this important, what are the nuances to this versus maybe other securities and things like that. I just don't know how much longer they can wait. And so my guess is that some point in 2019, we will see, versions of clarity. It may not all come in one announcement, but I do think that we're going to start to see that stuff because now you've got, hundreds of billions of dollars of market cap at stake. And I think that investors and entrepreneurs, really need the clarity to be able to go build this industry.
So I guess sounds like you, unlike others in the crypto sphere, let's call it, aren't really that critical of regulators, even the opposite. You're kind of positive. You think we're doing a pretty decent job.
I look at the worst case scenario, right? What if they'd come out and banned all ICOs and banned, legacy financial companies from working with crypto companies? There's a whole bunch of stuff they could have done that would have been incredibly difficult to overcome. And they didn't do that. And so frankly, I think that they started out enforcing on people who were obvious scammers or bad actors. Now they've gone to some of the more nuanced or complex projects, but it's still relatively small dollars raised, et cetera. I wouldn't be surprised if they end up enforcing on 2 or 3 large projects, right, that are kind of, household names, if you will. I don't know who those will be. But when it's all said and done, I think we'll look back and say, hey, these regulators did a pretty good job of encouraging innovation and fostering that innovation while still protecting investors and creating a safe marketplace.
I guess also, I know obviously crypto definitely had a couple of years ago a pretty bad reputation in the wider public. do you feel that it's changing? How much more needs to be achieved? Is this something which you can hope to achieve in a couple of years, or is this something which is really many more years down the line?
Yeah, 2016, 2017, there's a whole bunch of people that heard about Bitcoin and thought that, drug dealers used it, right? Or some sort of negative connotation with Bitcoin specifically, and maybe some other digital assets. Many of those people who now have familiarity with the asset and have gotten to understand it, learn, kind of see it demystified, they're not so convinced that only bad people use it, right? So it kind of takes time for people to get familiar with this stuff. CNBC covers it every day. Bloomberg covers it every day. It's written in major publications every single day. Smart investors are talking about this, right? All of these things kind of help with the validation and the demystification of the asset. Now, what we're seeing, though, is a whole new crop of people came in 2017 that had never heard about this before. And now they're the ones saying, oh, this is, for criminals, this is all this stuff. Right. Again, give them some time, let them get familiar with the asset, educate themselves, have it demystified. And I think eventually they'll start to see, look, bad people do bad things regardless of the industry. Doesn't matter if it's cryptocurrency or, traditional Wall Street. Yeah. Bad people do bad things. And so I think that, it just takes some time for this to kind of seep into the minds of people. And once it does, then, people realize it's not the asset that's bad. It's just the people who are using it.
And do you think, how about stuff like Backed and NASDAQ Future, which is coming up a big first half of 2019? I think those kind of things also help reputation in the sphere?
Anytime you can get big names with kind of legitimacy from the legacy financial institutions to come in, I think that, again, it's just a data point, right? A lot of those kind of more sophisticated investors, institutional investors, see that and they say, I might not understand it, but if they're in, I probably should look at it. And so I think, the more data points we can get, the better. The other thing that I would say is, a lot of people are kind of pro decentralization or decentralization exclusively. If it's not decentralized, they don't believe in it, right? Yeah. I'm probably more in the mind of decentralization is really, really important, but there is room for coexistence with centralized services if they are done the right way, right? And so in that world, what we need is we actually need as much infrastructure as possible. We need as many fiat on-ramps, as many fiat off-ramps, as many kind of legal exchanges. We need as many service providers. We need as many kind of derivatives, all of this stuff that we can possibly build this alternative financial system. We need it. And so some of that's going to come from legacy folks, and some of that's going to come from, startups and kind of new organizations. They can coexist, and they should coexist because they can learn from each other.
And do you think that's going to affect prices as well in 2019? How do you see that going?
We're of the belief and kind of prepared for a fairly long bear market. Okay. So, if the bear market persists into Q3, Q4 of 2019, I don't think we would be surprised. Obviously, along with everyone else, we would love for kind of the price, to keep going up and to the right, as with any asset, right? The S&P 500, those investors wanted to go up and to the right. And so I think it's less about, what do we want to happen and more of just what are we prepared for? With that said, I'm very fond of this quote, and I've talked about it a bunch, that Jeff Bezos has, right? Somebody asked him about, said something about congratulations on your earnings report this quarter. And he said, listen, it's nothing that we're doing right now. This stuff was baked 3 years ago, right? And the work we're doing today will be shown in the stock price 3 years from now. Well, I think crypto is very similar in that the work that's done today, you're not seeing price movement, but you're seeing all this good news, all this infrastructure, all these legitimate players. This work is actually going to show up in price 2 to 3 years from now, right? And so is that, end of 2019, beginning of 2020, into 2021? I don't know, right? I think it's just in the future, we will benefit from all of the work being done today. It's just not going to happen in the short term and kind of be, kind of dynamic price movements based on, news like this.
You've spoken quite a bit. Your main interest is, I guess, the underlying technology. You're talking about blockchain. And there's different critics that say that blockchain maybe gets too much respect because doesn't have so many real world use cases at the moment. What do you answer to people like that?
Look, the Bitcoin network, right? The actual transaction settlement layer is the most secure transaction settlement layer in the world. And that's really, really powerful and really, really underestimated, right? And so when you think of that, it's 10 years old, right? And if you look at Visa, MasterCard, right, these companies are 50, 60, 70 years old, and they're settling between 11 to $30 billion a day on their transaction settlement networks.
Right.
Well, Bitcoin does kind of 3 to 5 billion a day that it settles on the Bitcoin network. And so you've got the most secure transaction settlement network that's actually holding its own, right? If it does a third of the daily transaction volume of MasterCard, I would actually argue that that's quite impressive for something that's only 10 years old, right?
Yeah.
And it's incredibly difficult for people to use, right? So imagine as the layer 2, layer 3 technologies get built on top of that transaction settlement layer, I think people are gonna have a really, really hard time, and they're gonna look pretty stupid if they're yelling and screaming right now about how this isn't gonna work because no one uses it today.
So I guess you're kind of saying the opposite. It doesn't get enough respect, I guess, for technology at the moment. People are underappreciating it.
When I tell people that $3 to $5 billion is settled on the Bitcoin network on a daily basis, and MasterCard does 11 billion, a lot of people just don't know that, right? They kind of caught off guard. That's not exchange traded volume. That's actually settled on chain. And so when you think through that, that is only going to continue to accelerate, right? And as that number gets bigger and bigger, again, it is the most secure transaction settlement network in the world. And so every single transaction, as more bad things happen to the other networks, right? When Visa gets hacked, MasterCard gets hacked, all this stuff, more people will begin to put transactions, right? It'll kind of eat into their total transaction volume. They'll start putting it onto that Bitcoin transaction settlement network. And I think that people will look back and say, wow, we were focused on the wrong thing, right? We were focused on the price of the asset, and people weren't paying attention to the fundamentals that were driving kind of the price movements, 2-3 years from now.
You're obviously pretty active on Twitter. You have a very popular podcast. I guess, what role do you see the media playing, maybe even Twitter specifically, in this whole world?
Twitter is an incredible product, right? I'm shocked that it is free, to be honest, because I would definitely pay to use it. I think there's a couple of things that really resonate with me with that product. So I don't plan any of my tweets. Just as I think of things, I just send them out to the world. And what it allows me specifically to do is, one, not only communicate ideas in very kind of short form, right? So I don't have to write a blog post. I don't have to write an email. I can just send out kind of 280 characters. I can send it out to a very large audience. There's a lot of virality to it. So if you like it, whatever I say, you can favorite it, you can retweet it, you can send it to somebody, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, it allows me to say what I believe, right? And I think a lot of people are trying to curate a persona on social media, and they're very careful about what they say. What I've found is I say what I believe, and if I'm wrong, I'll correct myself. But the authenticity of, here's what I believe, here's why I believe it, and if you disagree, tell me why, a lot of people that resonates with. And so what I've discovered is there's actually a lot of people who think the same thing I do, right? And they just are popping up left and right. And so if you don't put your ideas out there, it's really, really hard to find those people. And I've connected with, pretty much everybody that I've met in this industry in some form or fashion. Twitter has played a role, whether I was following them, whether they were following me, whether we actually, DM'd each other, whatever it is, Twitter was at the center of it, which just makes it a really powerful tool.
Maybe even too powerful, though? Is it something which, I guess, this is kind of unrelated but connected? There was a recent report about lots of pump and dump scams that are being used through Twitter. Is Twitter become, in a way, a little too powerful, at least to this crypto world?
Look, I always challenge people, go to the grocery store and stand in the checkout line and look at the newspapers that are there, right, or the magazines. It's all fake news, right? It's the tabloids, right? And so this has been going on for years in terms of kind of misinformation being distributed and appearing as if it is legitimate, right? And rumors and all this kind of stuff. Now, the difference here is there's financial implications, right? People are making investment decisions based on it. So there's a nuance to it. But the idea that misinformation is being spread has literally been around since magazines and newspapers. Now, with that, I think part of what makes Twitter so beautiful is it's an attrition of ideas. And so if you have an idea and you throw it out there and we all disagree with you, you will know that we disagree with you because everyone will reply and comment. And now all of a sudden, somebody who sees your tweet that maybe is true, maybe isn't, can actually read through the responses and kind of get both sides of the argument, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think that that's a really, really powerful thing. Now, the part that we've got to do a much better job of is all the bots and the outright kind of, send ETH to this address and all that kind of stuff. Twitter did a great job eventually of kind of knocking that stuff out of the platform. I'm sure that those people are going to come back with some new scam or some new, mechanism. The hope here is that we can actually just focus on the real conversation and have a debate of ideas.
I mentioned beforehand futures, but I forgot to mention ETFs. Do you think people are putting too much significance onto it? Are people overreacting when it fails, or they overreact when it eventually passes? What's your approach?
The ETF's really interesting to me, right? So one, it should actually provide a less manipulated, more regulated financial way for people to invest in Bitcoin, for example. So the idea that it's not getting approved, again, it's just, I'm not an expert there. I don't know why, right? But just from a high level, it seems like it would be a good thing to protect investors in the market. Okay. Now, I like to always look at what is the consensus thought of the market and what would happen if that was untrue. So right now, most people believe if an ETF was approved, price would increase, right? And many people believe drastically increase in price if an ETF was approved. It would be really interesting to me if an ETF was approved and price went sideways or actually went down, because I think we would get this psychological impact of true capitulation at that point, right? ETF got approved. That was supposed to be the big moment. And all of a sudden price goes down. I don't know if people are prepared for that, right? I'm not saying that's going to happen, but that's the type of stuff where I think there's many, many more unknowns in this world than we usually give it credit for. And so thinking through kind of all of the scenarios is what, we spend most of our day doing and trying to figure out how are we prepared if any one of these scenarios plays out.
And what about SEC Commissioner Jay Clayton has said about manipulation being a big issue which he wants to be addressed? Do you think is a validated claim that he's making?
I have no clue. Right? I mean, look, I don't think he's saying anything he doesn't believe, right? So, and he's got more information than I do. So, I kind of just, when it comes to a lot of this regulatory nuance and the, minutia, they just got more information. They've spent more time on it than I have. And again, it just goes back to, hey, do your job, tell us what the rules are. And once you tell us what the rules are, we're going to go build valuable companies.
And what about the entrance of the corporations? We heard a story about Facebook working on something which might start in India with a WhatsApp app with their own stablecoin. Talk of also Amazon, Apple. What if they enter this world? Do you see that as a positive?
I don't, for me, it's not that it couldn't be a negative. I think it's unlikely to be a negative. And again, it goes back to this idea that every data point that leads to more adoption, more kind of familiarity, more education, more infrastructure, it's building the entire industry. Now, some of these companies are going to build things that, a large majority of the crypto industry doesn't appreciate, doesn't agree with, doesn't like, thinks is a bad idea, all that stuff. That's okay, right? We don't need every idea to be a good idea. We just need as many smart people working on this as we can. Obviously, there's a lot of smart people that work at Facebook, Amazon, et cetera. Now, when you go to Facebook specifically, I wrote this big thing last week around, Facebook is likely to be the most important company in crypto at this moment, right? Everyone's like, what the hell are you talking about? Well, they've got 2 billion users that use their product every single month. And so whatever they create, right? It literally does not matter what they create. Whatever it is, it's almost immediately the most used product in crypto. And so when you think about that, it's actually really important whatever they create, right? And I think the latest rumor or kind of news that broke is that they're working on a stable coin for users on WhatsApp in India.
Yeah.
Well, the way that I think about it is if they can create a token that the government approves of that is able to be transacting in real stable value in a country where they've got over 200 million users on WhatsApp, and they're able to do it in a mobile first way, that's pretty damn powerful, right? And we would say that even if it wasn't blockchain based, even if it wasn't cryptographically secure, just creating digital finance options for a country that is underbanked, where there's a ton of monetary or demonetization pressure. There's a bunch of kind of unique regulatory environment stuff going on there. And there's just a lot of people, there are 1 billion people. And so when you look at that, it's just, that's really important work. Now the hard part of, they got to build something that works and they got to get people to use it. And that remains to be seen.
Well, really now finally, obviously, the bet showed that you're very positive, optimistic in a 10-year run. You also mentioned the longer term, 2019. How do you see that playing out? Also price-wise, and also, I guess, in a more infrastructure layer.
So, Bill Gates has this quote that it's easy to overestimate what can happen in 1 year and underestimate what can happen in 10. Right? I'm a big believer in that. With that said, I think that the detractors will be very, very overwhelmed or impressed with what is done. Let's say when we're talking at the end of 2019, the supporters will always want it to happen faster, right? But the key piece here, and I try to stress this to people, is I fundamentally believe every stock, bond, currency, and commodity will be digitized at some point in the future. If you believe that, you should take the time to educate yourself and start working towards being a part of that ecosystem, that technology, etc. Now, with that said, this is not a 1-year exercise. This is not a 2-year exercise, right? This is going to take a lot of work and a really long time. The internet has been around for 40 years, right? And so imagine what crypto looks like 40 years from now. We literally can't imagine it, right? Because there's just things that are going to happen that are just unimaginable. And so when you think of that, 2019 almost doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, right? And so it's this, what we call urgent patience. You got to have urgency every day, but you got to have really long-term patience and understand that showing up every day is the most important thing we can do to make sure that we get to that kind of final finish line.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. That was great. I'll be in touch. I'll let you know when it goes live. I'll obviously tag you on Twitter so you can see everything. And great. Thank you so much.
You got it. Let me know whatever else I can do. Always happy to help.
Thank you so much. Have a nice Christmas and New Year.
Okay, you as well.
Okay, bye-bye.